John Hervey. How lovely to be able to say those two words together. You and I have known each other a ton, and yet there I am starting off by saying, what the heck are all those guitars in the background, John? I didn't know you played. John, in your own words, who are you?
Who am I? Well, let's see. I am a beyond middle-aged man who is well into his second career, having spent the first career in finance and Wall Street, the second career in healthcare and health startups for a variety of reasons. Very, very happily married to my bride of 32 years with
Love that.
two kids. Yeah. Both making their way into the world about now.
Indeed. And yeah, the funny thing is, of course, we not only went to the same university together, we actually worked at the same company.
We did.
Post university, Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, and so we both went along our little merry ways, and here we end up back on the phone together or Zoom. Gosh, a few years on. What I really reason I immediately perched on your job. I mean, you were very kind to get me in to do some work with you at one point, and I've been following your new track and this notion of being a CEO. You were CEO at Cota for about 3 years, then 4 years at Inspire, which is all about data infrastructure and analytics, and now at PatientsLikeMe. My thought for you, John, is to think about your now voyage in this new area as a leader. How has the notion of being a CEO changed for you?
Oh, it's such a great question. I think when I first took on the CEO role, I thought of it a lot like being a senior manager at a large company. But I had my own world being CEO, and it really isn't anything like that. It's a very, very different world. You have to both be fully accountable to your board of directors and investors, but you have to have a very strong sense of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and with whom you're going to do it. Whereas in a big company, you don't really have those requirements. The path is set, you're following a course, you're trying to work towards someone else's goals, and maybe you're going to add some things to it. But as a CEO, you are setting the course alone. And you want to surround yourself by great people, but you're still the one that holds all the blame if you don't do it right, but more importantly, that really gets the opportunity to make something of the company.
Well, so you've had multiple experiences, and I know for having hung out with you at that time on Cota that you had a personal reason that
Yeah.
was relevant for joining Cota Health. At the same time, you move along, and is it what are the parameters that you evaluate when you join in? I mean, put it this way, if I give a context, something, I know a lot of CEOs who have huge success, enormous paychecks, and can surf on or coast on their reputation for doing good stuff at the CEO level. And yet I don't actually see them as happy because they're doing a good job, they're working really hard, they're being successful, but they don't actually feel the business. It's almost like just a transaction on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's a little bit more than that because of the challenge and there's excitement in that. Yet, purpose, personal fulfillment, without going into the extremes, but is sometimes difficult to get. So for you, how have you surfed that? Because to the extent that Cota was so obvious, but for the rest.
Well, and it's important to just briefly recap why I left Wall Street and went to Cota. As you remember, I lost my father to cancer, and at the time realized that my local grocery store knew more about my father than the healthcare system did, for a variety of reasons. But we're so used to sharing data in all parts of our lives, but healthcare is different, and often for very good reasons, healthcare data is locked away, but it makes it very hard to use. And in the way the American healthcare system works, especially at the practice level, it is a factory. I mean, and I don't necessarily mean that disparagingly. There's phenomenal doctors and they can do phenomenal work, but it is all built on volume. I mean, you have to have very, very high volume. You don't have time to really get to know the patient. And as I say, I realized that there was so much more that the healthcare system could have known about my father, and perhaps it would have changed. I probably wouldn't have changed his outcome, but it could have changed his course. I joined Cota because it was a pure cancer data platform. I'd been on the board there for a number of years. And it's what got me immersed in healthcare. But to me, part of what was exciting was the data. Part of what was lacking were the humans. Because we were working with pure data sets. Matter of fact, part of our job was to de-identify them and to make sure that no one ever knew who these people were. And then hopefully that data could then be used to develop drugs more efficient. But getting closer to the patient was really what I wanted to find a way to do when I joined Cota. That led me to Inspire, which is a patient platform, as you mentioned. They do collect a lot of data, but it's far more about patients connecting with other patients. Okay. That to me led to my idea. And my idea was something that Inspire wasn't going to change to do, and that's fine. And the idea was, right now I look at the healthcare system and I see it being very fractured. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. Many of them are tiny little startups. Some are behemoths. But it almost, to me, feels like the patients are secondary. They're the customers. But, first I have my service. And, oh, by the way, I also have people who use my service. I have my tool or my drug or my implant. And, oh, by the way, I have people who use those things. I thought there's an opportunity out there to put a company at the middle that is made up of those patients, that links to all of those companies, a whole, a galaxy of companies, so that I can log into patients like me in this case. And I can get my prescription filled, see my doctor, make a new appointment, get symptom check, get genomic tests, have genomic testing counseling. All of those things right now that are individual labors for a patient. And that's what we're embarking on. So I've taken a company that was looking for new leadership, wanted to develop a new idea. I clicked with the chairman, a man named Larry Renfro, who is very well known in finance. But he'd been working on the same idea in his own way. And it was just luck that we came together and said, okay, here's the vehicle, let's go do this. So I'm only about 6 months in, but that's the idea. So having that, going back to what we first said, having a vision, an idea of where you're going to go, and then figuring out how you're going to get there. How much money do you need? What people do you need? Who are you going to connect with? How are you going to build this? Build out a plan and then execute.
Well, like you said at the very beginning, there's finding the idea, then there's with whom you're going to work, and yet at the end of the day, you are responsible. But it's always good to have some sparring partners and people with whom you have a certain confidential relationship and intimacy that you can go down and really shoot the shit, because otherwise, and from my vantage point, all the CEOs I talk with, there's definitely a lot of solitude.
That's so true. I have a very good board. Everybody on the board is really terrific. But I've got two people who, one comes from the financial world that I grew up in, and the other is Larry, who I mentioned, who was in the financial world, but then he went to healthcare, and he basically is the man who built Optum as the services arm of United Health. And having those two guys to be able to call and say, is this crazy? Or how would I do this? Or is there a better way to do that? Boy, that makes it a lot easier.
Isn't it, though, tricky sometimes when you, in that is this a crazy idea? You are avowing some self-doubt. You're not like the affirmative guy stamping, this is what I need to do, kind of, I know what I'm doing thing. When you introduce doubt, if you don't have that kind of a good team or good surround sound advice, they're gonna be like, oh, well, did we choose the right person?
Yeah. I've been in the circumstance where you cannot show any weakness. And both in the finance world and as a CEO, where you cannot show any weakness. If you do, you're a peg lower, and that's a true disadvantage. I mean, that's a true disadvantage. And by the way, I've learned that that's an important leadership skill in managing people. Is you need to allow people to be vulnerable. You want them
Underneath
to
you.
underneath you. And therefore, me having that ability to talk to some people is important too. I mean, they need to walk away with confidence that once we've talked about this, we've got an idea and we're going to go for it, and this is the guy to do it. But it's a whole lot easier to have those conversations with people who have a different perspective or a different view or different experiences, and to gain from that. Otherwise, you're just making a presentation at a board meeting and telling everybody all the time that things are fine, and that's very limiting.
Well, and frankly, I think rather risky,
Oh yeah.
because the idea that I know it all, and I'm responsible for everything, so no ability to delegate. How about, as you were saying, with your team? How about the idea of showing vulnerability with your team? Because so you have the people to whom you're responsible, the board, the investors. Then you have the people who are reporting into you. So it's already dangerous, let's say, to show vulnerability to your board, your investors, because all of a sudden they're going to have doubt. But you also have the possibility of doubt on the other side. And to what extent do you feel you can say to your team, you guys, I'm quite nervous about this particular decision, or I'm really not sure about this decision, or on another level, you know what, I had a shitty night last night. I'm really sorry. I might be a little bit acerbic, or I had a fight with my wife, or something that shows genuine vulnerability that can impact your performance. Is that something you've been bringing into the way you do things, or is that something that sort of needs to be separated? What happens at home stays at home.
There's a balance. To me, I think people do need to see you as human. They do need to know that you have a life. I do tend to be private after you get an inch deep. So I'm happy to share that first inch. But then I want to keep them a bit separate. But I think empowering people to understand, if I say, look, actually, I had a really crappy night last night. I'm really grumpy, or that I just came out of a really terrible meeting, guys. You need to understand this may not be our favorite meeting that we're following up with. I am in a bad mood. I think it's helps me to say those things rather than just let people figure it out. John's being a jerk today. But on the other element of showing, I guess, vulnerability in decision making and steps, there's also a balance, because you have a great team to help make things better, maybe to think of things you haven't thought of, to do things better than you can do by yourself, and you have to let them. Right? It can't all be you do exactly as I say. First of all, that would be exhausting. And second of all, you wouldn't benefit from those different perspectives and those different ideas, and hopefully the talents that you sought out when you hired these people, or kept them. So there is that balance of, all right, guys, we have to get this done. How should we do it? And I tend to find, as I've done this longer, I ask more questions, even if I already have a pretty good idea of what I think the answer is, just to give people a chance to surprise me, or to present a better idea. I find that a lot more effective than saying, this is how we're going to do it unless you have a better idea.
Well, and to follow that up, I mean, I've also seen people who ask the question, but are only too keen to impress upon everybody their answer, so that it needs to be done in a way where the people who are being asked don't feel like they're being immediately judged or immediately overridden because the boss said so.
Yeah, or set up for to give a foolish answer or what have you. Yeah, it's a balance, and then there's also the balance of, okay, that's fine for your immediate team. You'll have a different relationship with your immediate team than you may as you present to the entire company. I've seen a lot of back and forth as to whether CEOs should even have company-wide meetings anymore. That it's left them
Town
to
halls.
town halls. It's left them too open for unnecessary critique or people voicing opinions that are distracting, et cetera. I still like them. I still like letting people talk and letting people ask and say. And I don't know. One thing I learned, the favorite person I ever worked for, you and I both knew at Donaldson, Lufkin and Jenrette, who was always candid. He just told me what was going on, and I remember thinking back on that at some point. I don't know if I always followed it, but thinking back on it and saying, boy, it's a lot easier just to be straight with people. Here's what's happening. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. I mean, you can't share confidential necessarily
Sure.
information, but for the most part, you could tell people almost anything. Um, the reason we can't have a Christmas party this year is because we don't have the money. Here's what we have to do to get the money. Here's how you could be part of fixing this, as opposed to, we're not having a Christmas party this year because I decided we won't, and I don't want to scare you about the money thing. It's always a balance, but I find candor is just a lot. Honestly, it's just easier to keep track of. And so it's a
Yeah, if
lot
you're
more
lying all
credible.
the time, you don't know who you lied to, what you said last time.
Exactly. What
Did
did I
I?
tell you again?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you're referring to Stu, but it's interesting, this notion of being straight. There's the truth, and the concept even of truth, like beauty, is kind of moving around these days. What is the truth? And the thing that I grab onto is trying to be as congruent,
Yeah.
because when you're talking to your team and then you're talking town hall, you can't be two personalities. Just
Yeah.
like, and I feel, which would happen on occasion, which my family, my children would come see me speak in front of my employees.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be the same person, or at least link into that same person. I couldn't be a dick with a tie on stage to 1,000 people and be completely unrecognizable to my family. In fact, at any point, being unrecognizable to the people close to you, any point, when you're angry, when you're in a boardroom, when shit's getting, hitting the fan, finding a way to stay true to who you are is an ultimate challenge.
I agree with that. I also think as I've gotten older, I guess I've just mellowed in that I
Mm.
find it's also helpful to take a beat. Um, don't react instantly. Don't lash out.
You mean don't be a
Uh,
teenager?
don't be a teenager. Don't show the anger. You got nothing to prove anymore. So there's that even temperament. Now, I bring that up because there's also a downside to that, which is uh, I'm really pissed at something and people aren't really sure. Am I really pissed? Am I just, trying to take in more information? Is it all cool? And in fact, it isn't. So that even temperament can be a hard read for people sometimes. It leads to congruency, which is good, but it can also lead to some ambiguity as to how we're really doing. What are you really thinking? That personality element of keeping it inside, knowing when to then thoughtfully let it out.
Well, I suppose
Um,
his congruency is predictability.
yeah,
You can be hot-headedly congruent,
yeah,
And then there's a sort of unpredictability of going off the rails when normally John is a really relaxed dude.
Yeah.
And that sense of break. Well, of course, and then there's like when I speak on stage, on occasion, I'll let slip a big old F-bomb or something,
Yeah.
which is designed to surprise. And that sometimes you also, as the leader, need to sort of shock or surprise.
Yes. Well, by the way, that was a harder lesson coming from Wall Street, where the language is quite different, a bit let's say a bit saltier than I was used to when I first arrived in the startup world, and ran into a lot more people willing to be offended at dumb stuff. And I had to decide, does that mean I need to really change and just be super thoughtful about other people's, you know, or do I, and my view is kind of a little in the middle of, it may not be, I may not drop F-bombs with every sentence, but they still come out. I find words are effective when you use them, uh, at the right time. Everything has an appropriate use, and that includes my old vocabulary.
Indeed. Well, I mean, in French, there's a saying which is le verbe ou le mot est structurant. The words you use have their meaning. There's a couple more questions I want to talk to you about
Yeah.
leadership before we get into the specifics of patients like me. One of them is the word empathy. So this is a big topic for me. And the Google search requests around the word empathy are off the charts. There have been over 300 books published in the last couple of years with the word empathy in the title or subtitle. It seems to be a very trendy topic. I'm wondering to what extent empathy is relevant for you in your business, and to what extent and how you practice it.
Such a good question. I do think it's an overused term right now. It's also been, to be a good person, you have to be empathetic, is sort of how I think people are using it today. So I'm gonna, maybe I'm a bit more of a user in this sense, that you do have to understand, you do have to have empathy to be very effective. So I need to understand how somebody else is taking in a situation, and how somebody else is looking and hearing a situation, to be most effective managing them and to get the most out of them. So if that makes me a user, yeah, okay. So I need to understand that you're going to react best if I talk to you this way. And sometimes, therefore, I won't talk to you this way because I need you to think of things differently. But so empathy, of understanding and really trying to put yourself in a position of how does this person react, think, feel, can make me, I think, a better manager. It doesn't necessarily make me a nicer person. Because, as I say, sometimes I want to take the my understanding of how somebody's going to react to shape them up, to get them to do things differently than they're comfortable doing. It isn't all about, feeling good and happy. Sometimes it's feeling on edge. Sometimes it's feeling pressure, knowing that we got to get stuff done, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. But for me, I need to know that I'm making you feel uncomfortable. I need to understand what I'm trying to do, so I could change tacks if necessary. So yeah, empathy is a tricky one. I think as a good manager, you should understand. You should have empathy, but it isn't just about being that's.
Well, indeed, in the way I talk about it, empathy isn't about being nice. That's being sympathetic. It isn't actually even about what you do afterwards, like be nice or tend a gift, or give out some extra food. Let's say from a compassionate standpoint, empathy merely is about understanding. And if you use, to use your word, use the empathy for better communication, I don't think that is all abusive.
Yeah, well, obviously I agree. Uh, but I do hear people talking about empathy as, show a little empathy. It's like, well, you know, I think you
Well,
do need sympathy.
yeah, and then, and yeah, indeed. And in fact, there's a whole lot of material around that. But I bring it up not only because I have my own personal interest on it, but in the healthcare industry,
Yeah.
it is considered to be sort of the Valhalla of attitudes. You know, if you're at the bedside with some sick person about to die, you don't go on joke about, you know, how your Lamborghini is, you know, not going to sixth gear anymore. You have to consider the situation and the feelings and the thoughts of others. And the other day, I was invited by my sister to speak at 3 hospitals. My sister being a doctor, Haley's,
Mhm.
to talk about empathy in the management of a hospital, as opposed to the empathy at the bedside with the patient. And at the end of the day, it has been my conviction that if you want empathy at the end, let's say with the patient, you need to treat everybody along the chain. In other words, including the person who cleans the bedpans, including the sweeper, toilet cleaners, and of course the anesthetists, the nurses, and so on, in a way that's congruent with what you're hoping to do at the end.
It's interesting because I think back to my wife's mom, my mother-in-law, who I was very close to. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman, but she was very ill. She was in hospital. And we didn't really know what was going on. And a doctor on rounds, who I didn't know at all, I'd never met, came in. And as he's talking to me, I was getting a bit confused with what he was trying to say. And I pushed back by saying, you know, from what you're saying, you know, she'll never leave this hospital. And he looked at me and just said, she won't. I don't think there's any chance that this woman will leave this hospital alive. And, you know, it was so jarring. And I thought back on that moment many times because ultimately it was incredibly helpful to me. Um, because it allowed me to change my entire mindset here. My mindset changed to, I need to get my wife here because she was out of the country at the time. I need to I need to be here all the, I mean, this is a different
This is it.
situation than I thought it was. And yet he didn't need to do that. He could have just said, you know, we're going to do our best. You know, she's a fighter. She's, you know, et cetera, and left me with that hope. But the end was going to be the end. And in fact, she lived another, I think, 2 days. And my wife did get there. But but did he show empathy? Yeah. Was it the same as having a warm and fuzzy bedside manner? No. So again, what he delivered to me was jarring, uncomfortable, frightening, and very helpful.
And very
Um,
true.
and very true.
as
Yeah.
as it turns out. Like Becky, you said, John, at the beginning, you're talking about this notion of being straight
Mhm.
and being truthful at the to the best that you can be, as long as the intention of truth is appropriate. Because of course there are white lies, and there are times when you can't say things because it's confidential. But at the same time, and I think it really opens up this whole other chapter, which is this idea of being courageous.
Yeah.
And John, something I really appreciated in the interviews I was listening to, reading about you before the interview to bone up on Mr. Hervey, was the fact that you believe in being courageous. How did you get to that? It's today's world. I feel like there's a total lack of courage.
Yeah. Um, I think there are a number of ways to take that answer. You know, for me, I guess in thinking back on changing careers, it would have been much easier to just stay and you know, financially lucrative, all that kind of stuff, to just stay on Wall Street. Um, so maybe it was more courageous to move on, but I think courage still comes in um, truth and asking why, and challenging the premise. And on challenging the premise, I'll throw out one, maybe a little too avant-garde, but it occurred to me not too many years ago that there's a big gap between what we actually know and what we think we know. And in fact, most of what you know, you believe to be true.
Hmm.
You don't know it to be true. You believe it to be true. I believe man walked on the moon. Can I prove it? No. But you know, obviously he did. No.
Well, wait,
Um,
check on Google. Google will tell you.
exactly. So I think we've gotten to a point in society where, and not to be controversial, but I think people have gotten very lazy in their beliefs. Um, they must be right because so many people agree with them. They must be right because all of their friends think so too, or at least all their people on social media. Um,
Are saying
uh,
that they believe so.
they're saying this. I know empirically from the evidence that this is an unhealthy lifestyle, but people want to support it and encourage me. Therefore, it's good. And yet you don't have to work too hard to start challenging these things and maybe thinking that that easy way to go um, is not in people's best interest. It may not be in somebody's best interest to say, yes, you're perfectly healthy if you're obese. You're not. You're just not. Now you may choose to be, and freedom of choice, that's okay. But let's not kid people into thinking that that some decisions that are made are always good because they make you feel good. That's just not true. Or that that just because people agree with you that this is right. Sometimes you have to step back and say, okay, let me just test this. I want to go listen to other people. I want to go check some other opinions. And then where courage comes in is actually doing something about it. Either saying something, which is very uncomfortable these days. But then I also would say, if you're going to say something, leave open to the fact that you are stating your view, your opinion, what you believe to be true. Other people are allowed to have their other views, even if they seem abhorrent to you. They're allowed to have their other views. But again, understanding that if you go that extra step, spend a little bit more time, listen, learn, come to a conclusion, then do something about it. Speak up, speak out, act differently, change your life, change your lifestyle. Don't follow that advice. You know, all of those things, they're little tiny acts of courage. But I think it builds up to bigger things. It allows you to have the mindset to make bigger decisions in your life and to do bigger things.
So this idea of having the courage to say something, the how you say things is important because there are incendiary ways of expressing yourself.
Yes.
You can say exactly what you want in different ways, or at least what you're trying to say. And so the how counts back to your empathy piece, according to the receiver or receivers. And the other thing which strikes me about, so the idea of someone who has a health issue and the note. So I feel, and in your area, that not only have we gotten a little bit lazy, we don't want to we're not accountable.
Yeah. Yeah, we've given ourselves an easy way out of many things. So,
Convenience.
very much so. Yeah, with many people, I believe that they may know better. They may know that what they think is that convenience actually isn't. But I'm not sure that's always the case anymore. I think some people have just simply it's turned into a binary response, and I've got one answer and you've got a different one, and therefore I'm right and you're wrong, or I'm going to do this. Any other time in history, you would have known that this is wrong or dumb or foolish, but no, it's good. I can prove it. Look, and I think social media is a big part of that. I think many parts of industry are part of that. We're making it comfortable for people to not necessarily do the right things, help for their health or for society.
I have it makes me think of the song Teenage Wasteland,
Yeah,
how we are operating like teenagers when it's black and white.
yeah, it's true. That's true. Which, by the way, is such a funny song because it was a song. It was actually an anti-drug culture song that was then adopted by the drug culture as an anthem. So it kind of fits that same.
Well, it's something I wanted to bring up earlier, but I didn't, about this idea of letting go. I've had a wonderful interview with a guy called John Perkis, also known as Banahasta, for his Buddhist name. This idea of letting go, and when you're the CEO, you're supposed to be the idea is you're the know-it-all. You you have to make firm decisions, not always comfortable, but the idea of letting go and allowing for the specialisms of others in your team to say, I don't know how to do everything. I need you. Not only do I delegate, but actually I don't even know how to do some of this stuff. And that idea of letting the mantle go of like it all reposes on me. You have this niche, the idea of you need to be responsible and you need to let go.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes back to something we were talking about earlier, which is how do you create that sense of congruency? Part of being able to let go and let other people do things is tied to understanding where you're going, what you need to do as a group and as a company. So I can say we need to get to this point. I've got these parts figured out. I need help on these parts, but here we're all getting to this point. It's not, that's what I think in startups, especially, but many CEOs get lost in uh, financial goals. So they're told by their board, you need to make X revenues this year. You need to have X margin this year. And those are fine, but those are the outcomes of achieving goals. So if all you're set on is we need to have more revenues, well, gee, there are lots of ways you could do that.
To
And
everybody.
they may take you very well off track of what you're trying to achieve as a company. Now you have to be, rational about keeping a company afloat. You have to pay payroll, et cetera. But understanding, yes, I need to get here. I don't know how to do this part. You actually do know how to do this part. Help me do that. But again, we all understand why we're doing it. We're doing it to get to this. One of the things I've had to adjust to in moving from finance to health.
Well,
I started off.
you were an analyst in the space, of course.
I started off as an oil analyst, and there's
Oh my
nothing
gosh.
closer to healthcare than oil. I
Oh, I
then
forgot. Kurt Launer.
later, yeah, that's right. I then ran a company that was technology focused, and we pivoted to do technology and healthcare. So, I mean, there was a progression to get to healthcare, but at every step of the way, I've had to get other people who knew more about something to explain it to me, to understand how this works, to understand, because one of the other, I think, mistakes of startups is to think that their goal is to produce something that they think is cool, as opposed to produce something that the world needs or that their clients need, and they're different. If I walk into a pharma company and say, I've got this amazing thing, think of all the cool things you could do with this amazing thing, I'm not going to get very far. Whereas if I walk in and say, you're trying to solve this problem, I've got this. This will help you solve that problem. It may be just a better version of what you're doing. It may be completely different, but it's obvious to them what you're trying to achieve. Same thing is true when you're working with your team. We're trying to do this or achieve this to, why? To support this capability that our clients need. And to do that, here are the pieces we need to fill in. I won't know how to do all of those pieces. In the same way that I couldn't, I couldn't do our tax returns. It's not my job. I assume they're getting done appropriately. I'll read the audit, but you do have to be able to delegate that which you just need a little help with, or you need a lot of help with. But you at least understand how it fits into your journey.
And just riffing off of that, my mind walked into the Grateful Dead, and when you're a guitarist,
Mhm.
you need to let the keyboard play the keyboard, and you need the drummer play the drummer. I wanted to go into I want to save the last few moments to talk about Patients Like Me, but I just layer into that this
Yeah,
notion of killing death or ending aging. And this idea of immortality. There's about $600 billion flowing into the next couple of years
yeah,
into making us live longer and get rid of aging and death. And so that's what the investors are thinking. And they're the rich people. They get to do cryogenics and invest in ridiculous plasma transplants or whatever.
sure.
Not only do I think that it's not what people want, I certainly don't think it's what people need.
It also seems to be very out of step with a country experiencing declining lifespans,
Yeah.
right?
In
Uh,
America,
in America.
curiously. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. And yet, we're trying to find the ticket to
Eternity.
immortality. And maybe that's a good thing, but it's certainly not top of mind of most people who are trying to um, deal with severe or not severe health issues.
Mental
Everybody's a
health issues, by the way, as well.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, everybody is a patient at some level. You may not think of yourself as a patient, but everybody's a patient at some level. Um, and yeah, living forever, maybe somebody will figure it out and then figure out what to do with the population along the way. But
I have a
wow.
sneaking suspicion they haven't at all even scratched the surface of actually what that means. And my specific viewpoint I've written about this is a very unhealthy, unreal objective, and speaks to our issue of lack of acceptance of reality. So let's talk about, I know we could talk about that, I'm sure, John,
Yeah,
for a few
for a long
hours.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's talk about Patients Like Me just for the last few moments that we have together.
Yeah.
Because I basically, every country I've ever lived in has an issue with healthcare.
Mhm.
And in the NHS in England, you get to have 8-minute meetings with your doctor. You're allowed to talk about one issue, and your GP, general practitioner, can't possibly know everything about you. The collective information, the MRI that you might have taken, plus the CAT scan, plus the fact that you have a mother who might be sick in the hospital, and you might be sleeping badly, and you might be eating poorly. Oh, but my blood sugars are bad, or whatever, because I'm a type
Yeah.
1 diabetic. So every country seems to have problems. It seems to me with Patients Like Me, what you're trying to do is render more responsible the patients. That's my initial reading. What are you trying to do with Patients Like Me, and how can I help you?
So at the simplest form, this isn't the financial model, but it is the foundation that then allows us to achieve our financial goals. We're trying to empower patients to better understand and to an extent better control their health journey. That better understanding is difficult because different parties in the health system have different interests in telling you things, or trying to push your behavior one way or another. Uh, whether it's because they don't have time to talk to you anymore in the doctor's office, or whether it's because they really think it's better that you take this drug for the rest of your life rather than change a lifestyle or try something else. All of those things are realities of our health system today. But if you can put the patient in the middle of it, allow them to have peer-to-peer conversations that are based on data. It's not just, hey, I think this, but it's, here's my chart. And my chart's a lot like these charts. And these people are saying this and can tell me that. That's a Patients Like Me experience at its core. It was named appropriately of I want to interact with patients who are like me. We've taken it, though, to not just be about meeting and sharing data with other patients, which is kind of how it started, to also having these formal connections to my pharmacy, my diagnostics companies like Quest and Let's Get Checked, or to have connections to my health insurance company, or to have these formal things. So I can go on to Patients Like Me, let's just say in 9 months. You'll be able to go on to Patients Like Me and say, all right, this is my health coverage, if I have any. This is my health situation. And now have a better understanding of, well, do you want to make a doctor's appointment? Okay, we've got this service to make you a doctor's appointment. Oh, I'm not feeling well. Well, there's a symptom checker to check this. You have this diagnosis, you know, a genomics test would actually tell you a lot more, and these are covered by your health plan. And by the way, so is this genomic counseling that goes with your health plan. Bring all of that in, and then be able to import that data to, again, enhance that comparison, to be able to say, now I know even more about this individual on the platform, and can surface more things that may make their life better. So I want to be careful to not say it's empowering the patient, because in some ways that may suggest that they're going to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. We're trying to make it easier for them to do the things that they should be doing, without having to open 50 different apps and to try to remember where they wrote down that number, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
I have a friend in London who's working on the same type of issue actually with the NHS. And because when you go to do an MRI, they don't actually give you the results. It stays in some black box. And the issue I see, John, and I'm wondering how you would react to this, maybe the last question, which is, I'm different. Now, my situation is different. And so you have nearly 1 million members at Patients Like Me. What is the critical mass that allows me to say that I have enough patients like me? So I'm a type 1 diabetic. My wife has multiple sclerosis. To take MS, which has or even type 1 diabetics, which have 5 different. There are 5 different types of diabetics. Are we splitting hairs? Are we able to get enough type 1Bs versus 1As with MS, with all the different mutations, with Alzheimer's and all this? There's so many different variations. Well, I have Alzheimer's and cancer. Oh my gosh, you know, that makes you special. So how are you trying to deal with that, getting critical mass for appropriate returns?
Such a good question, because from a very practical standpoint, I could start by saying, well, everybody's different. Every situation is unique. Well, in that case, what's the point in comparing yourself to anybody? Because if everyone's unique. So you do need large populations. It's difficult for a company like ours to say we're going to immediately get large populations across every disease. So we'll pick our places. And that, by the way, comes into some of the commercial opportunity where we know we have commercial opportunities is where we may put more of a concentration initially to build up our patient populations. And the way we've gone about that and are going about that now is to partner with companies that may bring very large populations to us. So, for instance, we're working with a company in renal care that has trouble activating the patients that are on their list. They've been given a list by the insurance company saying, these are all the people who may qualify for your plan, 160,000 of them. And they send out a letter through the mail. And not shockingly, they have about a 0.5% follow-up rate, right? Then they send an email and they've got about a 1% follow-up rate. All right, so
engagement.
Something we're very good at is initial activation and then keeping them engaged, right? Because those are, so for that company, if we can engage far more of the 160,000, we now start to build up a very large population in kidney care. And with that, we're then able to show more similarities and more commonalities in where they are in their health journey. Some of the big things are staying on your meds, and understanding when you may be coming up for dialysis, and to understand the difference between home dialysis and non-home dialysis. So how do you get large groups? For me, it makes much more sense to partner with people who bring large groups in. Then we engage them and give them a platform that keeps them on board. And you're more likely to stay on board, by the way, if you're not just there to learn some things or to meet some people. You're there to do stuff. I need to get my prescription renewed. I need to make a new home dialysis appointment, etc. You can. So for us, bringing in these very large populations is how I think we will be going from that million. So of the million, we reach about 5 million are members. We reach about 5 million so a large number who are not members. But we're looking at, through our partnerships today, getting that number to over 50 million in the next 9 months. And over the next several years to have something well over 200 million. So
let's call that critical mass.
Yeah, exactly. And so you need critical mass. You need to do it step by step. And for us, the approach is to partner with those who bring in very large populations, not to just do it organically.
So for anyone listening, as I explored it and as I signed up, it seems to be a US based or maybe North American based. If you are a person that has a lot of different people in your database, that would be a key person to contact you, John, or anyone in your team, of course, at PatientsLikeMe. And just to finish, who would you like to follow up? What call to action, to whom, and how would you like to propose?
Who would I like to call to action?
Well, no, who would you like to, after this, listening to this, would you like to sign up, go to a certain URL? Who are you looking for, and where should they
go? If you're just simply a consumer, a patient, come to PatientsLikeMe at patientslikeme.com, sign up. It's going to grow a lot over the next year based on the plans that I've just started to lay out. But if you are perhaps involved with a care provider, an insurance company, we have very close relationships with United Healthcare right now, and others, but United, yep. And if you're working to build up what you think is an important piece to somebody's health journey, but you're trying to link into that flow of patients, give me a call. We've, in the last couple of days, I've talked to counseling companies, genomics companies, testing, pharma companies, and a company that is in pain management. All of them are likely partners of ours in the next few months. So there's an opportunity to be part of this, as I said, galaxy of partners.
I wish that we could talk about 23andMe, because I'm very sad to see that they've gone or are about to go. But John, lovely to have you and have this great exchange. It's been rich for me. I really appreciate it. And I wish you tremendous luck. This PatientsLikeMe, in the end of the day, it feels like it's an opportunity for people like me to take responsibility for their health.
I think that's right. And to be, again, at the center of it, make courageous decisions.
Beautiful. Thank you, John.
Minter, it's a pleasure.